Hello, everyone, and welcome to Café New Canadians, a virtual event series. Today's session of Café New Canadians is brought to you by New Canadians, a TV and web-based show that connects newcomers to valuable information and resources on immigration, settlement, education, employment, and entrepreneurship in Canada, so to help you succeed over here. Now, we air weekly episodes on Omni TV. That's where you can watch us. You can also watch us on YouTube, and you can watch us on our website. For today, I'm your host. I'm Shruti Dargan, and I'm pleased to welcome three speakers today. Our guest speakers would be Gloria Pierre. She's an author, speaker, presenter, and coach. Of course, she's someone who will be giving us a lot of valuable tips tonight. And we've also got Marcela Chein. She is the VP Public Relations of Unstoppable Xpeakers Toastmasters Club. Again, someone who was a member a few years ago and is now in a leadership role. So someone who can really help you understand how you can be a part of a club like that and benefit from the services. And we also have Luisa Rosas, who is a business and marketing professional, another member of the club who will be talking about her experience. So welcome to all of you. I would request for all of you to unmute yourself. We will be starting the session now. And before we dive into the topic, we'll just remind our viewers joining us today, if you're joining us on Zoom and you want to share your questions with us, with the speakers, because they'll be answering them live, you could post your questions in the Q&A tab over here on Zoom. If you're joining us on YouTube, where we're also live streaming this webinar, then you can post those questions in the chat box. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you, our guest speakers today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you over. Today's session, as we mentioned earlier, the topic is public speaking. We will be talking about public speaking. How is it that newcomers can adapt that skill? How is it that they can use it in their everyday lives, their professional lives, and work towards success? So, of course, public speaking is something that, as a topic itself, or the very two words can be scary for a lot of people. There's a lot of misunderstanding of the term. Some people feel like they're able to communicate very freely with people, but when it comes to public speaking, they suddenly have cold feet. Others, however, are very confident. But there's still some confusion around whether public speaking is the same thing as communicating very freely or clearly. So who better than Gloria over here today to start with and understand exactly what the difference is or what the similarities are.
Thank you, Shruti. First, I want to dispel the myth that public speaking is only for people who speak to large groups. That is not the case. And so when you hear public speaking, think of it as the conversations you're having in a meeting or with your boss or with your friends. It's the discussions that you will have. It's any kind of speaking or any kind of interaction you have with someone. And communicating clearly is what is needed in public speaking, to freely and clearly and persuasively express your thoughts and your ideas so that they're easily understood. And if whatever it is that you're saying requires some action, it will be easier for the person you're speaking to participate in that or acquiesce to your action for whatever it is. So don't think of public speaking as something fearful. This fear probably started many, many, many years ago, probably in the beginning of the 19th, early 20th century, I should say, where only a limited number of people were allowed to speak or were thought to have that gift. It is not necessarily a gift that you were born with, because as Marcela and Luisa will explain, it's something that can be learned, and it can be learned through Toastmasters for one. So don't fear it, just do it. Of course, you have to know how to do it properly before you become more confident. And speaking clearly is needed in every interaction that you have.
Thank you for clearing that out to our viewers and, of course, explaining it to us as well over here. I can see in the chat box over here that we've got people joining us from different parts of the world. We've got some people from Kuwait, from China, someone who's relocated to Toronto very recently, from different other cities within Canada as well. And that brings me to the point that, Canada is a place wherein we've got newcomers coming in every day. And one big challenge that newcomers face, or maybe not a challenge, but one big step that they have to, that they start over here is that, they say that you have to build a network, one has to communicate with people, maybe for job interviews, maybe otherwise while making friends, while visiting places. So of course, communicating is something that's really important. And a club like Toastmasters, of course, is a great place to be, wherein one can join, build that network as well, and at the same time learn from other members, and build some confidence within for public speaking as well. So that brings me to you, Marcela. If you could tell me about what exactly is Unstoppable Xpeakers Toastmasters Club all about, and
Thank you. Yes.
tell me a little about what are the top challenges that you think newcomers, maybe as part of your club or others that you may have interacted with, typically face when it comes to when they move to Canada and vis-a-vis, with respect to communicating?
Of course. Thank you, Shruti, and good evening, everyone. So, well, as newcomers, all of us face first the language, right? The language barrier of learning how to communicate effectively in a second language using the correct words. There are a lot of cognate words, which are words that are similar in our mother tongue and that are similar in English, and all the others that are false cognates, which they mean exactly the opposite, right? Those skills, we need to practice them in order to avoid those mistakes. Because here in Toronto, as you mentioned, a city that is full of newcomers and from people with different backgrounds, we need to communicate among each other, trying to understand their background, our own background, and now complying in a common culture. So practicing our public speaking skills is a must, because when you go to an interview, you need to sell yourself. If you do not have that vocabulary to sell yourself with all the skills that you have in your mother tongue, it's going to be very difficult to find that first job, that Canadian experience. That's something that we face as newcomers, right?
Definitely.
So also explaining ourselves with a good accent, with a good pace, a good tone. All of us have an accent, that's for sure. And also in our own mother tongues, we have a pace. We speak faster. For example, my mother tongue is Spanish. Everybody knows that people who speak Spanish speak really fast, which is not the same case as in English. So practicing it on a weekly basis with friends, with people that you feel confident, will allow you to get better opportunities and to connect with more people. So this is why we founded Unstoppable Xpeakers Toastmaster Club. It is an initiative from two different professional associations here in Toronto, and we decided to create our own opportunities. There are some workplaces that offer those Toastmasters clubs as part of their benefit, right? Because they want to develop their own staff. But for the ones that do not have that at our workplace, this is a great opportunity for us. Toastmasters is an international organization that can allow any person, any group of people, right, willing to practice public speaking and leadership skills to build their own club, to join it and connect with other people all around the world. So that is a great opportunity. Now with this pandemic, we are having our online sessions. So any person in any place of the world can join our meetings if they want to experience the atmosphere that we live there.
Of course. And all the points that you listed, I'm sure that these are exactly the concerns that a newcomer has when they move over here, because it's not just in the professional space, but pretty much, you're new in a country, you will be meeting new people. And every time you meet someone, you're introducing yourself. And that's how, you also end up practicing that elevator pitch for interviews as well. And, that just becomes a normal habit for you to kind of get it right each time. So that brings me to you, Luisa. Tell me that, how is it that you have benefited from being a part of the club? And what were some of the challenges that maybe you faced? Or are we right over here when we say that, when someone's new in a country, every other time that you're meeting someone, there are a few challenges, and how is it that public speaking could possibly help?
Thank you, Shruti. Well, one of the first challenges that I had is I came here and I started working at an accounting firm where most of my work involves dealing with partners of the firm, and I had to gather with them and just lead or take them through meetings for which I was not prepared at. So that's the reason why I started, because that was very challenging. Just communicating properly, just like Gloria was mentioning, it has nothing to do with speaking to a large audience, but I was put in a position where I had to speak with a group of people and try to make them understand what I was trying to convey, or just getting my message very clear to them. So some of the things that I've gained by being in Toastmasters is, well, first and foremost, the most demanded skill the employers ask, the number one is communication, which just being able to communicate efficiently and clearly, and just getting your message through. The second one would be practice and in thinking on my feet. And those things are very important because, let's say, especially in what I am doing, is where we go to trade shows and you get asked questions, and just by practicing that, you'll just gain a better skill on how to just answer eloquently and properly and in a good way. Another thing is just keeping meetings on task and time efficient, which, let's say, in Toastmasters, we have an agenda and it's covered and we have to just follow through, and we manage to just cover everything at that time, and we don't get anybody, just deviate from whatever topic we're just trying to reach. The next one would be giving feedback and receiving feedback. I guess a lot of us, I can speak personally, I come from Mexico, and we're not really used to either giving or receiving feedback. And in Canada, what I've noticed is a lot of companies, if not all of them, are very feedback oriented. They want to hear your feedback, and you're supposed to be able to receive feedback. So the way that in Toastmasters they do it is you give a speech, and then you have to be able to hear the good things, but also the areas where you can improve. And that's a way that you're also learn how to give feedback, because you as a leader in any work environment, you're also supposed to be able to give feedback in that way. And I guess the last thing that I've learned is just to boost your confidence overall, because that has taken me to be able to speak openly and freely and speak my mind and not be afraid of doing any mistakes or having an accent. Just like Marcela said, it's like we all have accents, and just be able to have more confidence in that.
Thank you for sharing these points. Of course, building that confidence. And sometimes, so with public speaking, some people misunderstand that or develop a certain fear because of that stage fear. Some people are camera shy. Who knew that we will be in times in a pandemic life wherein we would be having Zoom conversations all along? And, that camera fear that one had, now you're constantly staring into a camera, even for those basic roundtable conferences or meetings that you had as an everyday activity in offices. So of course, now we've so far discussed public speaking, how it's different from communicating clearly. There are some similarities as well. And how is it, both of you, Marcela and Luisa, you've shared your experience, you've shared what are the benefits. Now let's delve deeper into the very concept of public speaking. Let's clear it to our viewers. What are the different elements that constitute it? What are some of the features that one has to keep in mind? The do's and don'ts. So can we move to you, Gloria? And
Sure. Yes.
If you could just inform and educate our viewers a little about public speaking and what it's all about.
Okay, so in this case, I will use public speaking and communication simultaneously. So the elements of of communicating or public speaking are practically the same. There are three fundamentals: the speaker, the message, and the listener. The speaker has control over the situation because being the speaker. So the speaker has to first decide what is the message, what exactly is the message. I don't know if you've ever spoken to someone, or maybe this has happened to you, where you open your mouth and you start to say something and what is coming out isn't exactly what you wanted to say. And then the person say, huh, I don't understand. And that's because we didn't clearly define what the message is before we open our mouths. And that happens a lot to a lot of people, all of us. So it's imperative for the speaker to know what the message is, to know what the objective is. So for example, the objective today for me is to describe public speaking. And the reason for that is because people want to know what the difference is. So I have now to structure my message so that I could get the end result, which is at the end of what I have to say, the speaker will understand what comprises or what constitutes public speaking. So the speaker can convey the message by the voice, the strength of the voice, the tone of the voice, the quality of the voice, the pronunciation, accent, there is grammar, there is body language. Of course, we're sitting now, we can't really see a lot of body language, but body language is important. And I have to say about body language and tone of voice, it depends on which culture you come from, because some cultures express themselves more with their hands and with their whole body or with their voices or raise their eyebrows and so forth, more than some people's. So the speaker has to really know who the audience is. In addition to the message, they have to know who the listeners are, and tailor your message, tailor the mode of communication to the speaker. There is, for the message itself, you have to be aware of, again, the speaker, who is in the audience, and use the appropriate words or the level of knowledge that the speaker can understand. So you, for example, you're not going to talk to grade 1 students in words that has 6 or 7 syllables that they don't know or they can't understand. So you really have to tailor your message to suit the occasion, the environment, the audience, and the objective, what it is that you want. And so the listener it should be easy for the listener now to absorb what the speaker is saying. So it is the speaker's responsibility to bring all those factors into play when they are speaking, so that the listener doesn't have to work very hard to understand the message. And especially in a place like Toronto or any place, any multicultural city, anywhere, you will find that there are many accents, there are many ways of pronouncing words. Like Marcela was saying, you know, we speak words and words can mean different things in different languages. And I grew up in an English-speaking country, and I still pronounce some words incorrectly because they are not familiar where I come from. And a common example that I remember all the time is a name like Penelope, Peneolope. And where I came from, nobody was named. In fact, just one person I know who was named Penelope. But what did we call her? Penelope, not Penelope, right? So, those instances or occurrences happen all over and all the time. And I do a lot of work with immigrants. And one of the things that I should stress here is don't be too self-conscious about the way you pronounce words, because as both Luisa and Marcela said, that we all have accents, but we as newcomers or as immigrants, we think we are the only ones who have accents, and we become very conscious of it, and we shouldn't, because when somebody who doesn't speak our language or who we think don't have an accent, when we speak, they would say, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? But on the other hand, if they say something that we don't understand, we don't say, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? We think it's our fault, and we become very self-conscious about it, and we just assume or pretend that we understand. So it is imperative for us to think as immigrants in whichever country that this is something that we have to keep doing. If you don't understand, it is our responsibility to ask as immigrants. It is the speaker's responsibility to pay attention to the reaction of the speaker so they will know or they will sense whether their message was understood or not. So fundamentally, three parts: the public speaking, the speaker, the message, and the listener. And the majority of the responsibility in that case is on the speaker.
Of course. Thank you. Is there anything you were about to add before I started speaking?
No, not that I remember right now.
All right. Perfect. So, of course, you've listed a few really important points over here. You've broken it down for us to understand it better. And Luisa, I'll come to you now and tell us a little. So, when you joined the club, Gloria just mentioned a few things: the speaker, the message, the listener. Now, these three important components. Tell us about your initial days at the club as a member. Maybe the first exercise that you learned as part of the club, or some experience that you'd want to share as to an activity that you were asked to participate in, and how were you able to overcome a challenge?
I think the biggest challenge in Toastmasters is basically when the part of the session where you have to speak just out of a topic, out of the blue, right? They're called table topics. So it's impromptu speaking, and that's hard because exactly, it's very hard just right there and then to deliver the message and, like have an introduction, the storyline and then a conclusion. So that's the challenging part, but still you always keep on working on that. I think it's something that you always, it's hard for me to tell you it's something that I've already excelled at, not really, because you were always learning. And I guess
a spot and you have to answer something, one freezes, and the moment that moment is gone, then you think, oh, you know what, I really had like a ton of other points that I could have mentioned. And in it, so these are also elements or things that one has to keep in mind while public speaking. Marcela, tell me a little about tone and body language. These are two important things that Gloria just mentioned. So as part of your meetings, as part of your member conversations in the club, are these two elements also focused on, and how is it that you do that?
Yes, for sure. Body language, facial expressions, also vocabulary is something that we practice every week, and more because our club is diverse, right? It is built by different backgrounds. Most of us speak Spanish, so that's why we understand when we move in a certain way. But for the ones that do not, we see their face of confusion. So when we receive feedback, as Luisa mentioned, we're very vigilant on their feedback because we want to know if our message was delivered in a way in which they understood. And as Gloria said, we need to know our audience. We need to learn how they receive the messages so we can improve our communication skills. It's not just speaking, it's like exercising, something similar said Gloria at the beginning. We already speak, we know how to speak, yes, since we were 2 years old, but we do not speak in a direct way. We can achieve more. It's the same as walking. We all walk, but we do not walk marathons or run marathons. You need to practice in order to excel at those things. The same happens with public speaking. I can share with all of you, as I said, I speak very fast in Spanish and also in English, right? But I'm learning how to control that pace and how to think before I speak, because there are times in which I just say whatever I'm thinking, and that is not good because, as Gloria mentioned, there are times in which the things that we say were not exactly the same that we wanted to say. So practicing in all the elements that communication have, like language, tone, pace, body language, facial expressions, topic, the content is also important. You cannot just stand up in front of people saying nonsense, right? Or mispronouncing words and just that might be confusing. I know that we have another language, a first language, and that we have accents, but we can't start rounding up words in English in order to make them sound correctly. An example for all the ones that speak Spanish or that have heard Spanish speakers, letter J, we most pronounce like J, right? Because that's the way it sounds in Spanish. So we can say jail, like jail. So it could be either yell of shouting, right? Or jail as an oppression. So we do not know. And pronouncing it correctly will help us deliver a better message. So that's why all the elements in communication are very important to practice. And Toastmasters is a great place to practice it. There might be other speaking clubs, and that's fine. We can share our experience from our club.
Definitely. So simply put, it's your content and adding presentation to it, and it should equal to a clear message conveyed, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like a simple mathematical equation that we created over here now. So let's take a few audience questions. I can see quite a few in the sections over here. Lily asks all of us that, in your opinion, how is public speaking different in Canada compared to your own countries? It's a question open to all. So Gloria, maybe we could start with you, and if anyone has anything to add to it.
So the question is, how is public speaking different in Canada as opposed to your own countries?
Yes.
Okay. It is the same, really, because it doesn't matter which language you speak. You really have to convey your message, make sure it's understood, and make sure it gets the action that you're requesting. So I think the same elements would apply. It might be easier in your own country because you are, and especially if you are not a multicultural society like Toronto, you all speak the same language, you know the same words, you have the same gestures and so forth. So it might be easier. And also something that I notice very often with my clients is they speak fast, as Luisa was saying, speak very fast. And if you're from the same society and you're all speaking fast, well, then it's not a problem, right? Because nobody else is going to be challenged by it. So I think basically it is the same. The elements are the same.
One thing that maybe, I can add over here is, in my experience communicating with people in Canada, is the element of being really polite when you're talking. Like, of course, you're communicating that message across, but it's to be firm in what you're saying, but at the same time have a very polite tone than sound aggressive.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, that's my 2 bits here, but we'll move on to Marcela and Luisa.
Yes. I would like to add something about that. Also, the sense of humor in the speech, it's different. That is something that we need to understand. Maybe something is funny for us and it makes sense in our mother tongue, but when it is translated, it doesn't make any sense, or even though it's not even funny. So that's why understanding the audience and also understanding the culture, and an advice would be, hold a little bit on exposing your sense of humor until you know that person really well, because it can close so many doors if you make a joke or something that might be considered inappropriate.
Definitely great advice. One has to be careful of that, especially phrases and idioms I've heard.
Exactly.
Yes. Luisa, is there anything that you'd want to add to this?
I would say probably what has been mentioned before, understanding culture is very important, because let's say the way that probably you're used to coming across might come across as aggressive or submissive, or it can be taken in so many different ways that it's very important to understand the audience, and especially, as Gloria was mentioning, understanding as you were saying, Shruti, understanding the Canadian culture, right? Especially if you're addressing Canadians. Mm-hmm.
Yes. While I'm speaking to you, Luisa, there's a question that I think I'd pose to you. Monica, who's joining us on YouTube, is asking, how do you think Toastmasters helped you improve in your work environment?
Well, it helped me a lot because, as I was saying before, I have to deal, in my role, I have to deal with, I have to prepare for meetings with senior partners, for which I was not really prepared. I didn't know it was like part of my role at all. I was not expecting it to be that way. So for me, it was very important to take this course so that I could clearly convey what I was trying to tell in those meetings, because I lead those meetings. So for me, it was very, very important. And not only that, they have mentioned that they've seen an improvement in the way that I present, in the way that I try to say, state a message across to them, or just, not being afraid of, if I understand something, just being able to say, can you repeat that? Or I don't know what you're trying to say. And then without being afraid of, being judged. Or so it has helped me a lot. I think I've improved even in just not being afraid to speaking of my mind, because that's what they expect me to do. So I am expected to do that, and probably culturally, in my cultural background, it's not as popular. So that helped me a lot to understand what was expected from me just to deliver.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Two questions that I see in the Q&A section are particularly related to this pandemic situation that we're in. One, I'm not too sure if it's for the session today, but is it a good time to move to Canada? I don't know if there's ever a bad time to move to Canada, but any opinion that, or any advice that anyone has over here? And the second one, I'll just pose it together so we could address it. The second would be, again, because of this COVID-19 time, how can one master? So Lubna Shabn is asking us, how can we master facial and body language of public speaking during the online period?
I would start with this. As I mentioned earlier, not our whole bodies are visible when we are online. What we have to be aware of, though, is especially if we have a lot of head movements or hand movements and so forth, because if I'm doing this, it will get you distracted from everything that I'm saying. So you really have to be muted and minimize your gestures and facial expressions also, because you are visible for the whole duration of the call. So you have to be very careful that you're not conveying something that you shouldn't be conveying. So just be very aware and minimize any excessive gestures or facial expressions.
Definitely. Any other tips that our panelists have to add to that?
Well, also they can see themselves speaking in front of a camera. If there are meetings that are being recorded, just go back and check them and analyze how you did during the meeting. Listen to your words, listen to the tone that you're using, also the movements that you're making. It's like an autocritic to improve on what you like or you don't like about yourself and your speaking. That is an advantage that we're having right now with technology, that we can go and check ourselves and we will be our own judges, right? Maybe I like how I move when I am speaking so passionately, so I will make that movement mine. Or I do not like when I am nervous. I don't like when I put my side to I look at the floor. Well, try to practice them and make those movements conscious. And I would like to add on the question that if it's a good moment or to move to Canada.
To move to Canada,
yeah. Well, I think that any time is good to move to Canada. You will be facing more challenges than just COVID-19 when moving, right? This is just another tick to the checklist. It's a good moment and a good time to move, but also it's a good time to connect with other people and to learn from others on how to thrive in at least in Toronto, that it's a very multicultural city.
Certainly. Luisa, anything that you would like to add before we move on to the next one?
No, I think everything was covered by Gloria and Marcela.
All right. Thank you. A few other questions that I see here. People want to know how they can join Toastmasters. Towards the end of the session, we would be sharing the website with you. Of course, you can go on that and you can find out ways to join. It's open to all, and specifically, as Marcela said right now, the sessions are being conducted online, so there's all the more chances for people in different cities to be joining. Another question here was about public speaking. Priyanka is asking if she's interested in public speaking and helping immigrants in Canada with it. So what's the platform that one can join? Toastmasters being one. I'm sure that there are other platforms as well. So another question here. Marcela, I'll pose this to you. Oscar is asking us that what would you say is more important? One, to practice public speaking. So what is more important when it comes to practicing public speaking? Would you say that one should try that in a place like Toastmasters? Or is it better for one to get a job and then, force themselves to just practice it there when it's really important?
Well, it would all depend on the objective of the person, right? Toastmasters, our club, is a safe space to practice it. You can make mistakes. You will receive constructive feedback in a very friendly environment. We will want you to improve on your public speaking. If you want to practice it at your workplace, like without having a training, well, you can face judgment, or you can face maybe performance review at the end of the year that would tell you, hey, you should better start working on your speaking skills because we don't understand what you're saying. So I would recommend, and it's not because I'm the PP public relations of the club, but I would recommend you to join any club. If you want to join us, you're more than welcome. But join, practice. It's like going to a gym and getting better and better. And then when summer comes, you can show that body, that summer body, the same. Now when a public speaking opportunity arises, that will be your time to shine. But practice. I would suggest to practice before with friends, with family, or with a new network that you can build.
Great advice, definitely. Another question that people have been asking, and I'm sure as we move on in the conversation, there will be other questions that will get answered themselves, is around the concern of nervousness. Now, of course, Gloria, you mentioned that while we're talking online over here, it's easy, or maybe half of your body is not visible to people. So maybe if one has a habit of just shaking their feet while they talk because they're nervous, all of that definitely gets covered online. But it's a different ballgame altogether when it comes to speaking in front of people. So some of those top challenges that you have noticed in your years of communicating and working with newcomers and immigrants, some of the challenges that you could list over here, and maybe tips to overcome those challenges.
Okay. I have to mention that I was also in Toastmasters. I've been in Toastmasters for 25 years. And for, like Luisa, I've been in many leadership positions, area governor, division governor, everything you can think of. So I know the benefits of Toastmasters, and I always recommend Toastmasters to my clients because, as in the previous question, should you join Toastmasters or get a job to practice your public speaking skills, you have to do both. Both are to be successful in the job market, to get a job, to get a promotion, you need excellent, superior communication skills. So Toastmasters is great for that. To overcome nervousness, and even though I've been doing this for such a long time, I get nervous if I'm not prepared. I have to be thoroughly prepared, and I rehearse what I have to say over and over and over and over and over until I am completely satisfied with my presentation before I go out and present it. So to overcome nervousness, the first thing that I would suggest, it would probably be the only thing that you have to do, is be so thoroughly prepared that you know what you have to say inside out. And some of the other tips that I use, because I teach public speaking and I do accent reduction and all of that, the whole communication gamut, is I do a lot of vocal exercises and facial exercises to loosen up the tension in the face and the throat and the vocal muscles. I also do a lot of tongue twisters. And so I just want to share this with you. I was doing a speech last week, and as I was rehearsing my speech out loud, my voice wasn't sounding as good as I wanted to be. It sounded blah. So I usually do tongue twisters. And the tongue twisters that I was doing was not working because I was so familiar with them, you know, like Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. So I thought, okay, I can't do that. So I got another tongue twister, and I will attempt to say it now. I haven't mastered it correctly, but while I was practicing this tongue twister before the speech, I was just laughing so much that it really relieved the tension. I didn't have to do anything else to relieve the tension. So the tongue twister goes like this. A skunk sat on a stump and thought the stump stunk, but the stump thought the skunk stunk. Wow. And try saying that fast. It's so hilarious. So that's something that I do to relieve nervousness. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
The one main concern was, of course, nervousness. And what are the other challenges that you think, apart from nervousness, you know, what are the other challenges that one faces when it comes to speaking publicly, and how can one overcome that?
Okay, so it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the three fundamental parts of speaking clearly or of communication, which is the speaker, the message, and the listener. Another challenge that most people have when they have to do public speaking is they go into an unfamiliar environment and speak. And like in Toastmasters Club, you know what the layout is going to be. So you get so familiar with that. But if they have to present somewhere else, then it would cause them to readjust to just know what the environment is going to be. So when I have to speak, for example, I have a checklist that I prepared for myself. And I have a lot of questions for the person who's inviting me to speak. Who is going to be in the audience? What age group? What is the percentage of males and females in the audience? Because everything that I'm saying here, I learned in Toastmasters. Once, when I was very new in Toastmasters, I had to do a speech at an organization for women, and I was presenting the speech to Toastmasters Club to practice it. And what I didn't do was I didn't tell the Toastmaster who was chairing the meeting, give them a context for this speech. And the audience in this Toastmasters Club had males and females. And there I am going on talking about phenomenal women and going on and just talking about women. And the feedback I got from the male audience was really bad because, you know, I should have known my audience, which was really good actually, right? So I learned from that. So you have to know your audience. Are they going to be more males and female? What is the age group? What demographics are there? What kind of jobs they have? And the room that you're going to be speaking in is it a big room? Do you have a mic for me? Are there columns in the room that would prevent you when you're on stage, that would prevent you from seeing all the audience or the audience seeing you? And if you have an opportunity to go to that physical space and check it out, do that. I like to know how many people are in the audience. And I did ask that question earlier, right? How many people can be there? Because it's important to me. It doesn't matter if it's 50 or 500. But I have to know if there is a lot of people that are going to be in the audience, my energy level has to amp up the bigger the audience is, right? So these are all considerations that you have to take when you are going to be speaking. And actually, you just have to maybe eliminate one of two of those considerations when you're speaking online, because even when you're speaking online, you still need that energy in your voice, because if we are sitting all the time, we feel less energetic.
Yes.
So for me, I do a lot of exercises before I get online or in person so that I can have that energy and it can be conveyed in my voice. Something else that I did, which I wouldn't do again, was I had a coffee before and I was too hyper because I don't drink coffee. So you have to also know how those things affect you, because there's one person that I know who's lactose intolerant, and she had an ice cream cone just before we went on, and her stomach was just growling throughout her speech, right? So those bodily sounds you have to be aware of.
Definitely. Thank you so much for actually, not just sharing these wonderful insights, but also talking about challenges that you have faced personally, because that I'm sure is inspiration and encouragement enough for people joining us today. There is someone who's an expert, earlier faced challenges, then and you've overcome those clearly. Then of course, there's hope for all of us too.
And you can, as either Marcela or Luisa said, you can never learn enough. You never know enough. There's always room for more learning, for growth. And it doesn't matter how experienced or inexperienced we are, as long as we are open-minded and do the basics. You have to start with the basics to get good at anything. And Toastmasters is definitely the basics for communication.
Sure. Marcela, you were once a member, are still a member, and now you're also in a leadership role within the club. Now, if there's anything that you'd want to tell us about your journey in the so many years that you've been associated, please, that would be lovely to hear. And at the same time, if you could also highlight, due to your association, because you keep meeting so many people as part of the club as well, what are the top qualities that you would say are the ones that a good public speaker has?
Okay, so the first one, my journey as a public speaker, and I would say public speaker because it's just in Toastmasters, right? I used to be a teacher, and everybody knows that I used to be a teacher. So I was a public speaker in front of teenagers. That helped me to get the confidence, but I didn't know until I joined the club the importance of pauses, that I do not need to feel the space or the time all the time speaking and saying ideas, right? I also need to pause. I also need to wait for people to process what I am saying, and also for me to breathe and again process what I will say, not to just say things. So when I joined Toastmasters, as I told you, it was an initiative from a member from both organizations, right? And he just came and told us, what if we open our own club to practice public speaking? Most of us said, yes, we're in, because we want to be better. We want to become better speakers. We want to sell ourselves in a better way. We want to improve our pronunciation, language, and presence in front of an audience. So it has been really good for me, even though I already consider myself someone who was publicly speaking in front of an audience, and I have no issues on standing in front of 1 or 1,000 people. I don't care about that, but I'm learning how to deliver those messages in a short period of time, really effectively, concise, and with the best vocabulary I have. And also learning, because something that we do at Toastmasters is every week we learn a new word, and we need to incorporate that word in our speeches. So we are building on the vocabulary that we have, but we're becoming better. So that's why also I decided to be part of the leadership team, because it's a way to also practice my leadership skills and move forward and coach people on becoming better as well by sharing my experience. Because as I told you, as I have no issues on standing in front of people, there are others that they are very shy. So I learn from them, learning the pauses and the silence, the power of the silence, and they learn from me not being shy at all. Okay, so that is the answer to the first question. And the second one was?
Second one was, what are the top skills? So maybe we could list just top 3 or top 5 skills that you think a good public speaker has.
Well, it's a person that sends a message really clearly, with concise and understandable vocabulary. You do not need to use fancy words to send a message. You need to understand your audience, right?
Yes.
As Gloria mentioned, that you are not going to speak to a kid with words of 5 or 7 syllables. And being open-minded. I think that is very important, being open-minded, because you will have to deliver messages, you will have to receive feedback, you will have to be your own judge in order to continue thriving and getting better. So those would be the 3.
Thank you. Now the next one is from Luis Miranda. We have a question here. They're asking, how long does it take to overcome cultural barriers in communication once a person has migrated to Canada? Luisa, how about you take this one? With your own experience, what would you say?
It's hard to say a time frame, because I guess definitely the more open-minded you come here, the easier it is to overcome those barriers. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I cannot tell you it's gonna be 1 month, 2, 3, 4. The more open you are to improve, and the more open you are to listen and just to observe and to learn, the easier it is, and the faster it will be, definitely. But it's hard for me to tell you. For me, I guess you always, since it's a very multicultural country and a city, especially Toronto, you're always learning. I mean, that cultural barrier, you meet so many different people that you're always learning, but you have to be very open to be willing to understand and just to receive, whatever other people is telling you in a very positive way. I would say that.
Sure. And not just Toronto, the whole of Canada, that multiculturalism reflects in all of Canada, and with people from diverse places coming in. Another question here is about, again, going back to the fears, because most times, what happens is, as we've established in so long, is one is confident, but suddenly there's this fear that comes about, or due to some past experiences that one may have had. Karen Clark here is asking, they're sharing over here that when they started a job around 14 years ago, there's once that they were told by a colleague that a client was upset because they spoke in broken English. Now, the concern is that, one, they were very sure that they don't really talk in broken English. And because a client was upset, this really affected their confidence, and for many, many years to come. And the reason why that may have happened was it was a tax-related question somebody was asking, possibly not worded properly. There must have been some confusion. But even at times when you've really communicated it very, very clearly, somebody else is unable to understand. And if that affects your confidence, how does one overcome that?
I'll take that. What probably could have happened, and it's Linda, you said, or Karen?
Karen.
Okay. Hi, Karen. What probably could have happened, and I've seen this happen lots of times, is when we say something, we think we are saying it correctly, right? Because that's how we learn it, or that's how people in our community say it. But what I have noticed is there are challenges that we face when we speak English, when we learn English, or when we speak English as a second language. So some of the challenges come with pronunciation comes from the vowels and the consonants. So for example, if somebody is speaking, like Marcela was talking about J and Y just now, and how that you could easily misunderstood. And if the listener is not attuned or not accustomed to hearing people who speak English as a second language speak, for them, it's a big deal. It's not like us. We are accustomed to hearing each other. And especially if you're from a multinational, a multicultural place, it is very familiar. So you make allowances for those things. And so what probably could have happened is the person didn't really understand. And it's not necessarily the whole explanation that Karen gave. It could have been just one word. It could also be the attitude of the listener, right? Sometimes it's not even us, or it's not even the message. It's the attitude and the mindset of the listener. So that's why it's important to know who it is you're speaking to. And sometimes you don't have that advantage of knowing, but you always have to be prepared. So be aware of how you're pronouncing your vowels and consonants, because all the words that we speak are made up of vowels and consonants. And for example, braid, B-R-A-I-D, could sound like blade for somebody who don't speak or can't pronounce R. And if I'm saying something that is related to braid and it's something like blade, it could cause somebody to stop and think, okay, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, or they don't understand my question. Right? So that's just something that most people don't pay attention to. but it is a very big deal. Once you master those difficult challenges in vowels and consonants, your words are pronounced, you pronounce your words better.
Thank you for that. Another question that I saw over here was from Lubna about how can one use public speaking as a professional skill? How can one make the most of it, maximize the benefit? Now, another thing, so far we've of course discussed public speaking, the elements, the differences, how can one overcome challenges, all of that. Now, we established early on that, for a newcomer, when they move over here to Canada, it's not just in your everyday life, but it's also got to do with your professional life that public speaking plays a role. And one very important place that one can exhibit that is in a job interview. And for that now, early on, you have to present those skills on the resume. So let's briefly discuss that all of these skills that one learns as part of public speaking, of course, if you don't want to list it as public speaking, because that might not be a requirement of everybody's job, how is it? What are those keywords that one can, extract from what they've learned as a public speaker, put them on the resume for them to maybe get more calls? So like what I mean over here is a clear communicator, verbal communication. What are those different skills that one could highlight here?
If they don't want to put public speaking as a skill, because it's a misconception, all of us understand that it's in front of a big audience, they can list communication skills or developing communication skills in a Toastmasters Club, communication or communicating effectively in meetings, and knowing how to lead a meeting, because in Toastmasters, it's not only about communication, it is communication skills, public speaking, and leadership skills. They are all the whole skill set. As people know what Toastmasters is, because it's becoming more and more popular, and only here in Toronto, there are like 180 clubs, right? There are so many, and internationally, there are many more. You can now put it on your resume as I'm a Toastmasters member. So you are saying that you're actually developing your skills and you're becoming better. So that's a good way to add to your resume as well. And for example, Toastmasters also help for the project management certification for the PDUs. So it's recognized by another institution, right? So being in a Toastmasters club without publicizing the brand, but it's a good stuff because everybody knows what it brings and what people can develop in there.
I would like to add to that.
Sure.
So you have it on your resume, demonstrate it. You are in a public speaking environment as such during that interview. Demonstrate those skills, because showing is better than telling, right? So when you're going for an interview, thoroughly prepare. Now there are some words that maybe you can't pronounce that relates to the job. Practice pronouncing them before you go. Maybe you're nervous, do some physical exercise and just jump up and down or do a dance session before you go to relieve the tension, because all of those things would present themselves when you are sitting in that chair in front of the person. I mean, interviews are nerve-wracking as they are, right? So eliminate all of that and demonstrate, honestly demonstrate what it is you're saying on your resume. And that the interviewer will likely be impressed faster by that demonstration than by what's on the resume, right?
For sure. And all the things that we discussed over here today, these are something that you could list on your resume when you have a job interview. You could make use of that there. When you're speaking in public, you could make use of there in your daily office conversations, meetings, when you're out there networking with people. So basically, we've discussed all the different elements of public speaking and how is it that you can apply them in these diverse situations in your newcomer journey over here. Now, moving on to the last question, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to take more. We're very close to our time now. And that would be, this is a question from Aurora. She's asking that, do you think the challenges are the same when it comes to public speaking online vis-a-vis in person? Now, I know that we've discussed this, already during the chat, but maybe if there's anything else that one would want to highlight. And with that, also, let's quickly go around the virtual room over here and with one last tip or a message that you have about public speaking for our viewers.
Okay, public speaking, I'll address the online part of the question. So public speaking online, and I would just reiterate what was said before, that you have to have the energy in your voice, be aware of your physical gesture, your gestures, body language, so that it's not distracting, and make sure that, as we are all doing here today, that the room is set up for the call or the meeting. Because as we were speaking earlier, close your window if there's going to be noise from outside, or if the dog is barking, turn your phone off. These are all online etiquette. So just be aware of those.
For sure. Thank you. Actually, those are the real important ones, because one often focuses on the right way to talk, focus, all of that. But, we end up missing these little things, and then that causes a certain distraction, and then everything goes downhill from there. Yeah. So Gloria, we'll come back to you for the tip. Luisa, we'll start with you. A quick tip that you have, or a last piece of advice that you have for our viewers today.
Well, I would say practice. You have to keep on practicing. Don't be afraid. And just practice, I guess, is the key to excel at communicating more efficiently.
I think that's the most important one that you just highlighted to begin with. Marcela?
Well, I would recommend them to watch some videos of great public speakers and try to imitate what they like from them, and also record themselves and then watch themselves in order to learn how others see them. That is super useful. That's something that we've been doing since we started the Toastmasters Club. We started recording our own speeches and then sending them to the speaker, and whatever that had happened, it has become a really good tool for us to continue improving, because we are our own judges and we know how much we want to improve our public speaking.
For sure. Thank you for that. And Gloria, we'll conclude with you.
Oh, a last tip. Okay.
Yes.
A last tip would be, we all have stories in us. We all have things that we want to say, each and every one of us. And we don't express it because we are shy, or because we're very self-conscious, or because we are introverted, or because we think what people would say. My last tip would be, get those stories out. Join Toastmasters, learn how to express yourself clearly, confidently, and concisely, and just be yourself. Get those things out, because I know from my experience, once I expressing what was inside, I became, I think, more powerful, and I became a better version of me. So for everyone, get your stories out of yourself.
Thank you for that. And with that, we'll be wrapping this session. And thank you so much to all of you, our guest speakers and the participants, the attendees joining us for a wonderful session. You've not only shared these great insights, you've shared your own experiences, given tips, shared resources, and it's just been lovely having you over. On your screens also, you should be able to see now a few resources. We will be sharing resources with you in our following communication, but on your screen, you should be able to see the way that you can contact or reach out to Gloria and be a member of the club as well. You can click on these links, you can note it down. Don't worry about that. We'll also be sharing this with you in our communication after the webinar. And Gloria, you also mentioned earlier in our conversation before this that there's also a course which you have for accent training. We'll also be talking about that in the communication after the session, so that there are people who can avail the offer that you have right now and make most use of it. Okay. Thank you once again to all of you for joining us today. This session of Café New Canadians was brought to you by New Canadians. You can connect with us online. Before that, I'll quickly come back to a session that we have tomorrow as part of Café New Canadian sessions that we have every week. There's one which is right there tomorrow. This would be about lessons learned from moving to Canada. Again, this is a way that you can, learn from newcomer leaders over here. We will be in conversation with a few people, and you can learn from their experiences and get more information that would be valuable to you as well. Of course, as I was mentioning earlier, you can connect with us on our different social media channels that you can see on your screens right now. And you can also reach out to us, connect with us here, tag us in your journey, subscribe to our newsletter. It's an e-newsletter that we send out every month, again, listing out our top stories and most important information that we have to share with you. There's a quick survey that we would request for you to answer before you log out. That would help us understand how can we do better, how have we been performing so far. And with that, once again, thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. And I hope that the session has been valuable to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.